Hey everyone, my name is Alec and welcome to another edition of MASL Midweek, where I break down the past and predict the future for the MASL. As always, we will start this episode by talking about some events from this past week. Most notably, we'll talk about the MASL announcing their March schedule and some changes to their playoff rules. Looking at the schedule, I think the most notable thing here is the fact that there are some games being played in Ontario this month, which is something I didn't really expect, and I bet a lot of you did not expect it either. And I have mixed feelings about this. On one hand, I'm excited that we get to see some games in Ontario, and I'm excited for the West Coast teams, that they get to play some games at least a little bit closer to home, and in Ontario's case, at home. But on the other hand, I'm a little bit nervous that this could become a bit of a train wreck because Ontario is in California. And we all know through the course of this past year with the pandemic, it's been an up and down roller coaster. Positivity rates go up and down. We see waves coming and going, and hopefully that's evening out a little bit now with the vaccine, but we still don't know. So we could see a spike between now and then. And Ontario is in California, and California is one of those states that has been very willing to put restrictions in place to try to slow the spread. So my concern is this, that coming into March, for whatever reason, we see a spike in cases. And California decides that they want to put some restrictions in place to try to even out, to try and flatten that upcoming curve. And because of that, Ontario is not allowed to host games. I know that's kind of a worst case scenario, but I don't feel like it's that unlikely. I think it's still a decent chance of it happening. I think it's more likely that it will not happen, but I think the chance is still out there. And that concerns me a little bit. You know, I presume the games could be rescheduled, but I don't know the logistics of how all of that would work out. So that's my general feelings about Ontario. I'm excited, but I'm also a little bit nervous that that worst case scenario with a spike and restrictions comes into play. The other pieces of news related to this announcement both pertain to the playoffs. First of all, teams no longer have to play 12 games to be eligible. Instead, they just have to play 10. And the other piece of news is really kind of non-news, and that's the fact that the league has still not announced what the playoff format will be. Now, I know this has led to some frustration among fans, and that's understandable, but I don't feel a ton of frustration myself. For me, this season, from the very get-go, was never going to carry the same significance or the same prestige as a typical MASL season, and because of that, I'm willing to give the league a little bit more leeway when it comes to things like deciding how teams can qualify for the playoffs and deciding on when the playoff format should be chosen. Now, looking ahead to that playoff format, I've gone back and forth in my head of what I want it to look like, and ultimately I decided on two things. First of all, don't call it the Ron Newman Cup. A lot of people have said this, and I think that as long as you don't call it the Ron Newman Cup, you can really do anything with the playoffs, and I would not be that upset. As I said, this season does not have the same prestige or the same significance as any other MASL season, so there is no reason that teams should be competing for the Ron Newman Cup. It just doesn't make sense this year. So don't call it the Ron Newman Cup, and I don't really care what they choose for their playoff format. But if you were to ask me what the playoff format should be, looking at how the schedule has been uneven and teams are playing different numbers of games and whatnot, I really think it makes most sense just to have every team make it into the playoffs and have the standings be the seeding for those teams. And I would take a page from the NFL's playbook. This past season, they had 7 teams from each conference qualify for the playoffs. The MASL has 7 teams total. Use the same format that the league did, that the NFL did for their conference playoffs. Have the first seed team get a bye. All the other teams play each other in the first round. 3 teams advance, and you go from there. That to me is what makes most sense. As I said though, I'm not going to be that picky about the playoff format. I'm not that concerned about it. This season was never going to be as significant as a typical MASL season. Never going to have quite the same prestige or the same formality. So I'm cool with whatever they do for the playoffs. Just don't call it the Ron Newman Cup. But of course, on top of that news, there were also some games played last week. We'll start off with the St. Louis playing at Kansas City game. The Kansas City Comets won this game in pretty convincing fashion. Now, I know that St. Louis was missing some key players due to COVID protocols, but I really think we're starting to see what Kansas City is and how they can be such a dangerous team. They still have some defensive issues. We saw that throughout this game, especially in the fourth quarter. But Kansas City now, I think, is reaching the point where they are such an offensive powerhouse, they can overcome their defensive shortcomings, at least for now. That's going to win them a lot of games, just having this super high-powered offense and a defense that is good enough. Now, I come from Baltimore, and we strongly believe in the saying, defense wins championships. And I think that's true for arena soccer. So I don't think that this formula the Comets have been using and that they've been winning with for the past few weeks is going to work as they progress into the playoffs. For now, it's great. Just have a ton of offensive firepower, hold on just enough on defense, and you'll be fine. As I said, it's winning them games for now. I don't think it will win them games in the playoffs. So we'll see if they're able to tighten up their defense a little bit between now and then. But for now, it's just that old saying, as I was saying, offense wins the games, defense wins championships. The other game this week was the Florida Tropics playing at the Dallas Sidekicks, where the Florida Tropics won 6-5. And this game was a lot closer than I thought it was going to be, and a lot closer than I'm sure a lot of you thought it was going to be. I did pick Florida to win this game, but I thought it was going to be a blowout. So Dallas, to me, in this game had the same issues that they've had. Now, I've said many a times before that I think Dallas, in general, just doesn't force the issue enough when they're playing. They tend to be a little bit too conservative, and it just doesn't pay off for them. There are some teams that can play that style, and it works out great for them. For Dallas, though, it's not a long-term solution. It's worked at some points this season for them, but not at others. But as I was watching this game, I started to get a sense that maybe I wasn't fully capturing the entire problem with this team. And I say that because there were moments in this game where they were fairly aggressive, and it still backfired on them. You know, there were moments where it ended up with like 3 Florida players behind the Dallas defense and Florida easily scoring a goal. So I don't think that me saying Dallas is not aggressive enough really sums up the entirety of the problems facing this team. I really think the bigger issue here is it just seems like this is a team that doesn't have a clear direction for them. And I know that's super vague, but after watching this game, that's the only way I can think to describe what this team is right now. Now, towards the end of the game, once they started to get into kind of survival mode, they were down by, I think, 3 or 4 goals at that point, and they started to force the issue a little bit more and had a little bit more of a cohesive attack. They started to look great, and that's why I know this team can be dangerous if they're all playing in a cohesive manner. But as I said, you know, for up until now, I've been saying that they just weren't aggressive enough, and I still think that's part of the issue, but I think it's just a smaller component of this larger issue where Dallas doesn't seem to have a fully cohesive approach, at least not at all times. And when that happens, other teams easily take advantage of them. So once again, I come back to this thing I've said over and over again. Does Dallas need a new coach? I say yes. We'll see if it actually happens. At this point in the season, it probably makes sense just to ride out this season with their current coach and bring in someone new in the offseason. But we'll see what happens. Ultimately, I'm not involved with that organization. I don't know all the ins and outs. I'm just an external viewer trying to make sense of what's going on with this team that is just not playing up to their full potential. Okay, now that we have last week's news out of the way, let's go ahead and do some predictions for this week's games. We'll start off on Thursday with the Florida Tropics hosting the Tacoma Stars. Now, the Stars are a team that I think is very good, a team that looks very dangerous, and a team that has had some good moments this year. But they've also had some COVID issues, so like Dallas, they have not lived up to their full potential, but I don't see any reason that Tacoma will not reach that full potential soon. And they could be getting pretty close to that in this game. So I think this game is going to be a great game, very competitive. I just don't see the Stars winning it, though. I think the fact that this game is in Florida and Florida has such a dangerous team is going to allow the Tropics to win this game. It's going to be close, but I am picking the Tropics. Later that night, we have the San Diego Sockers hosting the Ontario Fury in Florida. It's a neutral site game, and I'm intrigued by this one. We all know that Sockers Fury is one of the great rivalries in the MASL, and we've seen little bits and pieces of each of these teams. And up till this point, we see a Sockers team that looks decent, but I don't think they're playing at the level that they have in the past, and I think they still have a little bit of room to grow this season. And then you have Ontario, which is a team that looked really dangerous in their first two games against St. Louis. So looking at these two teams' rosters, overall, I think they're about even. But right now, I just think the Fury is playing better than the Sockers. So I'm picking the Fury to win this game, but I expect another competitive game from this one. Then on Friday, we have the Tacoma Stars hosting the Ontario Fury. And I'm going to use the same logic that I did for the Fury versus San Diego game. These are two teams that, on paper, roster-wise, I think are both very good and pretty even. But the Fury, they're the hot team right now. I'm picking the Fury to win this one as well. Next up, we have the Florida Tropics hosting the San Diego Sockers. Now, as I already said, I don't think San Diego was playing to their full potential in their first two games this season. A lot like Tacoma, however, I have no reason to believe that San Diego will not soon be playing at that full potential. But they haven't proven it to me yet. And because of that, I'm picking the Tropics to win this one. Again, this is going to be another really close game. I see this weekend full of very competitive games, but right now I just see the Tropics beating the Sockers. If the Sockers do play to their full potential, they could easily win this one, but they haven't proven that to me yet, so I'm picking Florida. Then for the last game on Friday, we have the Kansas City Comets hosting the Dallas Sidekicks. As I already said, the Comets right now, especially offensively, are smoking hot, and Dallas is not. So I'm picking the Comets to win this one. I think, unlike the other games, this one's going to be a bit of a blowout, and the Comets are going to come out on top. Then on Sunday, we have the San Diego Sockers hosting the Tacoma Stars. Two teams that I think are both very good, two teams that did not look like they were playing quite to their full potential during their first few games this season. Now, I'm going to keep in mind that for Tacoma, one of those games, they had serious COVID issues. They were missing something like half of their team. So I'm willing to give Tacoma a little bit of a boost in my mind, knowing that that was the case. And because of that, I think that overall, through those first few games, Tacoma looked a little bit better than San Diego. So because of that, I'm picking the Stars to win this one. Again, it's been a couple of weeks since these teams have played, and I know they've had plenty of time to get more practices in, get some more time with each other to get into some good rhythms. But I've got to base my predictions off of what I've seen from them so far this season, and because of that, I'm picking the Stars. Next up, we have what I think is the game of the week, the Florida Tropics hosting the Ontario Fury. Florida, they're a great team, you know it. I don't have to say much about them. Ontario, a team that I was a little bit unsure about coming into the season, but through their first two games, they looked really good. So we have a team that we know is really good versus a team that is hot and looks really good. It's a tough call, but we have a larger sample size for Florida. Florida has been playing well for well over a season now. Ontario, with their current roster, we've seen them for two games. So Ontario could very well be better than Florida, but I just can't say that with certainty right now. So I'm picking the Tropics to win this one. But man, this is a game that I'm looking forward to. I think I'm going to miss about the first hour of it because of work, and that's disappointing. But you know what? This is going to be an amazing game. I'm probably going to have to go back and watch it after the fact. Then finally, we have another game with the Kansas City Comets hosting the Dallas Sidekicks. Once again, I'm picking the Comets to win this one. And once again, I'm predicting a blowout. And with that, I think I can wrap this video up. But thank you for watching. While you're here, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time.